Hello and welcome to this Badumna Cloud video tutorial. Badumna Cloud is a service that lets you create multiplayer games in real time. It's so easy to use, we're going to show you how to make a multiplayer game from scratch in less than 10 minutes. Before we begin, you need to sign up for a Badumna Cloud account. Log in and create a new application, and then download the Badumna Cloud Unity SDK. You will also require a copy of Unity3D installed on your machine. Let's get started. Here is my copy of Unity3D, and I have already downloaded the Badumna Cloud Unity SDK and unzipped the contents to my desktop. The first step is to create a new project in Unity3D. I am now going to import the Badumna Cloud Unity package. You will need this package for all your multiplayer games. This package includes the Badumna library and all the template scripts for making a multiplayer game. Next, I'm going to import the Demo Assets Unity package. This package is game-specific. It includes a LERPS prefab for the player characters, a joystick prefab for an on-screen joystick for mobile platforms, and a bunch of other textures and skins. All the assets have been freely sourced from the Unity Asset Store. The next step is to go to the Projects Scene folder and open the demo scene. Our demo scene contains several objects: ground, invisible fences, this is to stop players from falling, a light, and a camera. I'm going to create a new game object and rename it Game Manager. As the name suggests, it will act as the game manager. Let's add the Game Manager script to the Game Manager object. You will find the Game Manager script in the All Scripts folder. All I need to do is drag the Game Manager script from the project window into the Game Manager's Inspector window. As I mentioned before, the Game Manager script takes care of loading Badumna's network script and exposing some of the core functionality. We are going to edit this script and add a few public fields to the Game Manager class that will allow us to specify a prefab for the player and an on-screen joystick for touchscreen devices. Let's save this script and go back to Unity. We are now going to edit the player template script. The player class needs to define all the properties that are going to be replicated across the network. As you can see, the script already includes position and orientation properties. All replicable entities must have a position property, but any other properties are optional and need to be marked with the replicable attribute, as we can see on the orientation property. We are going to add a replicable property for our player character's animation. The animation property is going to need to synchronize with the game object's animation controller, so we'll add a backing field for the animation controller. We will now add an animation name property that wraps the animation controller's animation name. This property will be automatically replicated by Badumna whenever it changes, as we have set the replicable attribute on the property. You will notice we have also added a character name property. In this demo, we do not need to replicate the character name, so we didn't use the replicable attribute here. If your game involves other properties that would need to be replicated across the network, you would add them here in the player class. Finally, we will add an awake method to initialize the animation controller with the game's object component. Let's save this script and go back to Unity. The next step is to edit the network script. Let's find the network script and double-click on it to open it in MonoDevelop. I'm going to go through the script to show you the typical workflow of Badumna so that you can understand it better. The steps that are required to set up replication using Badumna are as follows. You initialize Badumna by calling begin_create. On successful initialization, you will be returned a network facade object. You log into Badumna using the network facade. You then join a scene by calling join scene. Here, you will need to provide names of two delegates, one for creating replica entities and one for removing replica entities. You then register your entity with the scene. You need to regularly update Badumna by calling process network state. When you are finished, you call shutdown to gracefully exit your application. Most of these steps have been pre-programmed for you in the network template script. Starting in the awake method, we can see the call to being create to start initializing Badumna. In the start method, we wait until the initialization is complete, then create the network facade. We log in and then call join scene. In join scene, we call create local player, then join a scene and register our player entity with the scene. We will need to fill in the code for create local player. You will notice that the create local player has code to throw a not implemented exception. We will replace this with our own game code. We'll instantiate an instance of the player prefab that we added to the Game Manager class and add some Unity components for the player physics, controller, and animation, and set the radius and center of our character. We will also add our player script to the player game object. If we are targeting Android or iOS, we will need to hook the controller up to the on-screen joystick, so we'll add the controller for that too. Now we'll add some code to the create replica method to create Unity game objects for all the remote players, and the remove replica method to destroy remote players as they leave or move far away. As I mentioned before, these are the two delegates called by Badumna when a remote entity comes near the local entity or moves far away. Let's save this script and go back to Unity. We're almost there. We need to configure the Game Manager object to specify which assets to use for the various game objects. If we select the Game Manager object in the Hierarchy window, we can see all the configurable fields in the Inspector window. From the Prefabs folder, drop the LERPS prefab onto the Player prefabs and drag the Joystick prefab onto the Joystick prefab. Now, open the GUI skin folder and drag the iOS skin asset onto the iOS skin field in the Inspector window. I am now going to set the application identifier to the value that was created for my application on cloud.badumna.com. You should use your own application identifier here. The last step is to select the correct assemblies for the build target. Open the Badumna Builds Target dialog and select the path for the Assemblies folder in your SDK. If you were building the game for iOS or Android platform, you would enter your bundle identifier here. I am building for desktop, so I will leave this field as is. Now all I have to do is click on the Configure button, and it will set up all the player settings and import the correct Badumna assembly. We are now ready to build the game and test it out. I am going to start 2 instances of the game to demonstrate replication in action. You can see that the 2 players can interact with each other. I hope you've enjoyed this Badumna Cloud video tutorial.